Welcome to Midnight Grove, where stories take us places we never expected to go. Tonight's tale, The Train That Only Stops Once, follows Daniel Brennan, a man who finds himself at a train station long after the last scheduled departure. When a mysterious train arrives, one that only appears once in a person's lifetime, Daniel is faced with a choice: board and confront the past, or walk away and never know where the tracks might have led. This is a story of regret, memory, and the quiet magic of second chances. So settle in, close your eyes, and let the journey begin. Chapter 1: The Station at Midnight. Daniel Brennan had been standing on the platform for what felt like forever. The clock above the station doors read 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes to midnight. 2 minutes until what? He wasn't sure why he was here. He wasn't even sure how he had ended up here. The day had been unremarkable. He had left work late, taken the same subway home, eaten dinner in silence. The routine of a man who had long stopped expecting anything different. But somehow after dinner, instead of going home, he had walked. No destination in mind, no purpose, and yet his feet had led him here, to an empty train station, at a time when no trains were supposed to run. But then a faint, rhythmic sound echoed through the night. Distant, steady, growing louder. Daniel's breath caught as the train emerged from the darkness. It was unlike any train he had ever seen, sleek and polished, its brass fixtures gleaming under the dim station lights. The windows were tinted, but faintly illuminated from within, casting a golden glow onto the platform. The train slowed, hissing softly as it came to a perfect stop in front of him. A single door slid open, and from inside a man stepped out, the conductor who knew his name. The man wore a uniform that looked as if it belonged to another time. A deep navy coat with gold buttons, a matching cap resting neatly atop silver-streaked hair. His expression was calm, expectant. "Daniel Brennan," he said. Daniel's stomach tightened. "How do you know my name?" The conductor smiled faintly. "Because you're on the list." Daniel frowned. "What list?" The conductor stepped aside, gesturing to the open door. "Why don't you step inside? We can discuss it on the way." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "On the way to where?" The conductor's smile didn't falter. "Wherever it is you need to go." A choice in the silence. Daniel hesitated. This wasn't normal. Trains didn't just appear in the middle of the night. Conductors didn't know your name and invite you on board without explanation. Everything about this felt like something out of a dream. But somehow, standing on that empty platform, staring into the softly lit interior of the train, it felt less like a mystery and more like a decision. He could turn away, go home, pretend this never happened. Or he could step inside and find out where the train was meant to take him. Daniel exhaled. Then, without another word, he boarded the train. The door slid shut behind him, and the world outside faded away. A train without a destination. The interior of the train was unexpectedly warm. Soft golden lighting, polished wood paneling, plush seats arranged in small compartments, each one separated by frosted glass. Daniel followed the conductor down the narrow aisle. "How long is the trip?" Daniel asked. The conductor glanced at him. "Depends on where you're going." Daniel frowned. "And where am I going?" The conductor gave a small, knowing smile. "That's up to you." Daniel let out a slow breath, trying to make sense of it all. "So let me get this straight. This train," he gestured around, "it just appears and people just board without knowing where they're headed?" The conductor nodded. "It only stops once in a person's lifetime, and only when they need it." Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. A train that only appeared once. That only came for people who needed it. His voice was quieter when he asked, "How does it know?" The conductor regarded him carefully. "The same way you knew to be at the station tonight." Daniel looked away, because the truth was he hadn't known, and yet somehow he had ended up here anyway. The first stop, a memory. The train shuddered gently. Outside the windows, darkness gave way to landscapes Daniel didn't recognize. He expected city lights, highways, something familiar. Instead, he saw rolling green fields under a sky painted in soft hues of purple and blue. The conductor gestured to a compartment door. "This one's yours." Daniel hesitated, then pushed the door open. Inside was a single seat facing a large window, and sitting on the table in front of it was an old photograph. Daniel's breath caught. It was a picture of himself, younger, maybe 12, standing beside a man with a kind smile and a worn-out baseball cap. His father. Daniel reached for the photo, his hands trembling. His father had died when Daniel was 14. A heart attack, sudden and cruel. One day he had been there telling Daniel to grab his coat before heading to the game. The next, he was gone. Daniel hadn't thought about that moment in years. But now, sitting alone in a softly humming train, staring at the photo, the memory came rushing back. The last baseball game they had ever gone to together. The way his dad had clapped him on the back after he caught a foul ball. The promise his father had made, "Next season we'll come to even more games." A promise that had never been kept, not by choice, but because time had made its own decision. Daniel swallowed hard, the familiar weight of regret pressing against his ribs. "I never went back," he murmured. The conductor, who had appeared quietly in the doorway, tilted his head. "Back where?" Daniel traced a finger along the edge of the photograph. "To another game." His father had loved baseball, and Daniel? He had loved it too. But after his father was gone, he had never been able to step into a stadium again. Not once. The conductor studied him carefully. "Is that something you wish you had done?" Daniel didn't answer right away. The truth was, yes. He had spent years avoiding the things that reminded him of what he had lost, not just baseball. Everything. The hobbies he had abandoned, the people he had let drift away, the opportunities he had ignored because he was afraid of feeling anything at all. Daniel closed his eyes, then softly, "Yes." The train rumbled beneath him, and outside the window the scenery began to change. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. Wherever this train was taking him, he was finally ready to go. Chapter 2. the stop that wasn't on the map. The train moved steadily through the night. Outside the window, the rolling green fields of the last stop had faded into something new. A city skyline, glowing softly beneath a deep blue sky. Daniel hadn't moved from his seat. The old photograph of himself and his father still rested on the table in front of him, untouched. The weight of it felt heavier than paper. It was strange. He had spent years pushing away thoughts of his father, locking away the memories like old boxes in an attic. Now the past was right in front of him. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to turn away. A second memory. A soft knock sounded at the compartment door. Daniel glanced up. The conductor stood there, his expression calm. "May I join you?" Daniel nodded. The conductor took a seat across from him, folding his hands neatly on the table. "You've been quiet," he observed. Daniel let out a short laugh. "Yeah, well, it's not every day you take a train to nowhere and find pictures of your dead father waiting for you." The conductor smiled faintly. "Not nowhere, just places you haven't visited in a while." Daniel looked back at the photograph. His voice was quieter when he said, "I didn't think I had any more places left to go." The conductor studied him for a moment, then tapped the table beside the photo. Another slip of paper appeared. Not a photograph this time. A ticket. Daniel frowned. "What's this?" The conductor tilted his head. "Take a look." Daniel picked it up, and as soon as his fingers touched the paper, the scene outside the train changed. A stop that shouldn't exist. The city skyline vanished. In its place, a baseball stadium. Daniel's breath caught. It was familiar, too familiar. The brick exterior, the towering lights, the electric hum of a crowd that hadn't arrived yet. It was his father's favorite stadium. Daniel swallowed hard. "Why are we here?" The conductor didn't answer. The train slowed, coming to a smooth, deliberate stop. And then the doors slid open. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "No, I don't want to go out there." The conductor's expression remained gentle. "Why not?" Daniel exhaled sharply. "Because it's been 20 years, because it's too late." The conductor studied him. "Too late for what?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. "For what?" "For making peace with the past. For letting himself feel something again. For living." The conductor gestured to the doors. "This stop isn't on any map. You won't find it again. And if you don't step off now, the train will keep moving." Daniel's heart pounded. He could stay in his seat, let the stadium slip away into the past, just like it always had. Or he could go. Stepping into the past, Daniel forced his legs to move. Step by step, he walked to the open door. The night air was cool, familiar. The smell of popcorn and freshly cut grass drifted in from somewhere unseen, and as he stepped onto the platform, something shifted. The stadium wasn't empty anymore. It was alive. The sounds of a distant game echoed through the air, cheering crowds, the crack of a bat, the announcer's voice calling out plays. Daniel's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a memory. It was a moment he had left behind. And now, it was waiting for him, the seat that was saved. Daniel walked through the familiar brick archway and into the stadium. The stands were filled with people who didn't see him. Fans in jerseys, kids holding oversized foam fingers, vendors carrying trays of hot dogs, and then Daniel's breath caught, because there in section 12, row C, sitting exactly where he had been 20 years ago, was his younger self, and sitting next to him was his father. Daniel's chest tightened. He knew this moment. This was the last game they had ever gone to together. A part of him wanted to move closer, to sit beside them, to change something. But the conductor's voice drifted through the air. This isn't a place for rewriting the past. Daniel turned. The conductor stood a few steps behind him, watching carefully. Daniel swallowed. Then why am I here? The conductor's gaze was steady. Because there's something you left behind. Daniel looked back at his younger self. The boy who had no idea that this would be his last game with his father. The boy who had loved baseball before it became too painful to hold on to. The boy who had been told, "Next season we'll come to even more games." Daniel exhaled slowly, and then he finally understood. A promise kept even late. Daniel didn't speak, didn't reach out, didn't change anything. Instead, he did the only thing he could do. He sat down, not in the past, not in the old memory, but in the present, in an empty seat near the dugout. He closed his eyes, listened, felt the heartbeat of the stadium, and finally, he let himself miss it. Not just the game, not just his father, but all of it. The love, the loss, the years in between. And as he sat there, something inside him unclenched. Something let go, not of his father, but of the fear that moving forward meant forgetting. Because the truth was, some things don't fade. They just wait for you to find them again. The journey home. The train was still waiting when Daniel stepped back onto the platform. The conductor met his gaze. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Daniel let out a small breath. "I think I found something I didn't know I needed." The conductor smiled. "That's usually how it goes." Daniel hesitated. "Where are we going now?" The conductor tipped his hat. "Home." Daniel nodded. And for the first time in a very, very long time, he was ready. The train that only stops once. By the time Daniel stepped off the train, morning light had started to creep into the sky. The station was empty. No train tracks. No conductor. Just a quiet platform and the distant hum of the city waking up. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the ticket. But the destination, once blank, now had a single word written on it: return. Daniel exhaled. Then, with quiet certainty, he walked forward, toward the life he had left waiting for him. Thank you for joining us at Midnight Grove for the train that only stops once. Daniel's story reminds us that the past doesn't disappear. It waits for us in the quiet moments, in the choices we make, in the things we leave unresolved. But sometimes life gives us a chance to go back, not to change what was, but to understand it, As you drift into sleep, may you find peace in the idea that it is never too late to return to the things that truly matter. Sleep well, and we'll see you next time for another thoughtful bedtime story.